What's up, guys? Nathan here. The other day, I was playing my Fireball Miner on stream, working towards my goal of a headhunter, and then I sort of realized I don't really want a headhunter. I've never been super interested in the ultra high-end mapping endgame in the sense of having a bunch of inspired learning, shackles of the wretched, self-cursing headhunter stuff. It's just been something that I know is very expensive and easy to sort of mindlessly grind towards, but not something that's actually terribly interesting to me. Because for me, the main reason why I love Path of Exile is there's such a wealth of different kinds of builds and archetypes you can try that theory crafting and trying new things has always been the most interesting aspect of the game for me. So really the only reason why I was even grinding towards a headhunter at all is because I didn't know what I wanted to play next. And while I was playing the miner on stream, I sort of had a realization the only thing that I really know I want to play at some point during this league is I want to make a build using the new unique sword, the Saviour. In case you don't know about the Saviour, it's basically a pretty expensive and rare drop that comes from Cyrus at Woke 8. I think it's around a 5% drop rate, and all it does is every time you crit with it, it creates an illusion of you, up to 2 illusions, and each illusion will deal 50% of your damage, scaling basically identically to your own character. And they'll deal a shit ton of damage, and basically it's a 100% more multiplier on your damage for pretty much any melee sword build. And I figured I really wanted to use this sword, so I dropped the dream of a headhunter for now and decided I was going to try out a new build that was entirely focused on the Saviour. So first things first, I needed to figure out just really a lot of things regarding the build, but most importantly, what skill I was going to use. Because there are a lot of melee skills in Path of Exile. A lot of them feel kind of crappy. A lot of them are kind of weird to play. Some of them feel really good. But because the Saviour generates these 2 mirages with very wonky AI, I wanted to test a lot of different skills and see if there were really any, standout options of weird skills that may not feel great on their own, but interacted really well with, the Saviour's wonky AI. Sadly, most skills actually feel pretty terrible. For example, we tested some stuff like Charged Dash, Lancing Steel, Wild Strike wasn't that bad, Shattering Steel, Blade Flurry. We tested a lot of skills that may be okay on their own or maybe less than desirable on their own, but with the Saviour, we kind of discovered they're actually just a little bit worse because the Mirages don't know what to do. Unless the skill is like a melee strike skill where the illusions know they just have to get up and close and start beating the shit out of things, there's a high chance they're just not going to play properly. Like, for example, Lancing Steel, instead of, standing it around mid-range and clearing as best as possible, they literally stand as far away as possible and try to snipe individual enemies. Shattering Steel and Blade Flurry, they'll stand so far away it'll barely even deal damage. Charged Dash, they will charge their dash up, and if they are in the middle of hitting a specific enemy that they targeted, they'll just continue to channel that charged dash over and over and over again, and they won't let it go. And when you're playing Charged Dash, I know it's not a super popular skill, so not a lot of people know the mechanics, but when you're playing Charged Dash, you regularly want to let go of your channeling to sort of deal a massive burst of damage, and they just don't know how to do that. So it was very frustrating trying out a lot of these skills. So many of them felt crappy. But like I said, the one type or kind of skill, or tag is actually a better way to look at it, that interacted very well with the Saviour was Strike skills. Strike is a tag you can see at the top of your skill gem, so that'll actually make it very easy to reference the various skills that I'm considering viable here. But basically a strike skill is any skill that mimics your basic default attack. So the Mirage AIs will get up close and personal and just, beat the crap out of whatever enemy they choose to target. I'm also going to be linking Don the Crown's video on this sword, and he put this out a couple weeks ago, so this is a little bit dated, but as far as I'm concerned, this video does an excellent job of addressing just why the Saviour is so powerful. It addresses how powerful it is from a damage standpoint, and then goes over some of the more niche skills that he tested it with to show that really at the end of the day, there's not a lot of skills that are actually going to help with your clear speed when using the Saviour, and it really is just a single target steroid in most scenarios. But for me, I didn't want to just pick a skill like Cyclone or whatever. I wanted to pick a skill that I really thought the Saviour could interact with well, so I decided I was going to focus on strike skills. If we look at the strike sword skills that are available on the wiki, we can see there's actually 17 different options, and around half of them are actually strong enough to be considered viable, in my opinion. I tested out a number of them. Dual Strike was actually feeling very good with Ancestral Call and the Might and Influence Threshold gem. Double Strike, I wasn't a huge fan of because you can cancel it now, the way animation canceling works, and I just don't really like how that feels. And I eventually settled up on Flicker Strike. And I know this is considered kind of a divisive skill. Either you love it or hate it. And it is kind of eye cancer to look at. I apologize for that. But for me, it was definitely the best balance of clear and single target damage. I know it's weird to say that Flicker has decent single target damage now, but if you have good frenzy generation and you have a couple of max frenzies, Flicker gets a lot of juice and you could actually have very solid single target damage. I'm also using Tribal Fury, which is a trick I figured out thanks to the Fast AF cold Flicker Strike video he put out, I think about a week ago at this point, maybe a few days ago. And that's a really excellent way to get good single target damage out of Flicker because it means you don't have to gem swap. You don't have to use melee splash. You don't have to use ancestral call. You're just always using a 6-link damage setup and you're still clearing at an insane pace because, Flicker Strike. I would say that the illusions aren't, or I'm sorry, I should call them mirages, aren't fantastic at generating their own charges, but I'll get to that in a second when I talk about my ascendancy choices. My main decision I had to make in this regard was either Zerker, Slayer, or Champion. As far as I'm concerned, these are the very best melee ascendancies in the game. Zerker, absolute best damage overall. You just can't beat Aspect of Carnage. Slayer, fantastic utility with Bane of Legends, fantastic survivability with Leech, and a huge amount of damage to boot. And then Champion on top of that, which isn't quite as high damage as Zerker, but has access to really nice Impale scaling. So if you're even just a little bit lower on the budget M, I think Champion can pull ahead of Zerker in some scenarios if you're specifically playing an Impale build. However, for me, I wanted two things. I wanted to be ultra speedy and fast, and I wanted to be a snowflake. So I chose to just play a Raider. I also kind of wanted to play with cold damage because I like the idea of freezing and chilling enemies as a defensive layer, and Raider has better access to all of that sort of pen and elemental damage scaling on the right side of the tree. Now, I'm sure some of you guys are thinking, Nathan, why are you talking about scaling an elemental build? The Saviour is a physical damage weapon. Now, I agree with that to an extent, but the truth of the matter is the Saviour has a terrible, abysmal amount of physical DPS. I'm talking, I think it's the best roll you can possibly get is 280 PDPS, and you can get foils with more PDPS than that for, probably 20C, maybe a little bit more than that. I know you can definitely get unique weapons like On's Might or Scale that will totally outclass it. Point is, the Saviour is not a weapon that you use for its physical DPS or really its DPS at all. You just use it because it's a 100% more multi on all of your damage. So what I chose to focus on instead was my main hand weapon. And because I was free to either go elemental or physical here, I decided to go with one of my favorite weapons in the game that I had never gotten around to using until now, and that is the Paradoxica. If you don't know what a Paradoxica is, it's actually just one of the most simple weapons in the game, and that is a foil that simply reads, attacks with this weapon deal double damage, and then it has 2 veiled mods on top of it, so you can get stuff like attack speed, chance to impale, quality, accuracy, all of that good stuff. But for me, I wanted to go with Ellie stacking, so I chose to go with attacks with this weapon penetrate, a certain amount of elemental resistance, and then attack speed. So together, we're looking at a weapon, 2 weapons. Neither of them really have any DPS to write home about. The Paradoxica has terrible, just non-existent DPS. And then the Saviour has, like I said, just very, very low physical DPS, which opens us up to just stack as much elemental damage as possible. The more elemental damage we stack, the more we're going to get those double damage hits on the Paradoxica, and the more mileage we're going to get out of that additional, basically quadruple damage, if you want to count it with the Paradoxica, from the Saviour. I will make the caveat that technically we are also trying to do a little bit of conversion here, because even though we focus mainly on stacking as much cold damage as possible, the small amount of physical damage you get from Paradoxica and the small amount of physical damage you get from the Saviour, converting that over actually really doesn't hurt. I mean, at the end of the day, if you can fully convert, that's going to add at least another solid 200, I guess I'd have to do the math on this just to be 100% sure, but something like 200 flat cold damage if you can fully convert, and really there's nothing wrong with that. That's only half as good as an awakened cold damage gem, but still pretty solid. And if for anybody who's concerned about the Paradoxica not being as strong of a choice versus foils, I've already tried subbing in different foils from trade sites to see exactly what would be better than Paradoxica, and you need around a 550 physical damage. This is a very, very expensive foil, a 550 PDPS foil to even get close to beating Paradoxica. And even then, if you get more added cold from things like Watch Watcher's Eyes or a well-rolled Mark of the Elder, or even if you go back and you do the synthesis rings with Herald of Ice, again, you make it so much harder to end up beating out the Paradoxica. And a Paradoxica with the rolls that I'm going to be using in this build only costs around 8 to 10 exalts. A foil that even starts to approach being able to compete with this Paradoxica is going to cost you 50 plus exalts. So it's just a really good value, and it's a really cool weapon, and it lets you build in a way that is really simple. Because at the end of the day, once you sort of check all these boxes, all you really need to do is try to ease out or sort of eke out as much flat cold damage as possible, which is a very simple way to look about min-maxing your build in the absolute endgame. So that's kind of the intro to the build. Now I'm going to sort of talk about how my experience has gone, because I've played this build for a total of 4 days now, and I want to be honest with you guys, I'm having a lot of fun. First of all, let's talk about the leveling experience. Absolutely terrible, absolute cancer. Can't say that I would recommend anybody ever level with Flicker ever again. What I did is I took my first ascendancy point as Raider that gave me a little bit of frenzy gen, and then I got a 20% Flicker strike, which gives it another 20% chance to gain a Flicker on hit or gain a frenzy on hit. Sorry when you're using it. But still, the generation is just not there. I don't really understand why the generation is not there. Somebody helped me math that on my Discord, and it should be around like a 20% chance to not sustain frenzies, which can be a little frustrating if you're starting from 0 frenzies and you get unlucky. But even if you have, 1, 2, or 3, or, up to 7 frenzies, you should be okay. Still, it felt really shitty. I don't recommend leveling with Flicker, guys. Just don't do it. Just level with like Frostblades or Cyclone or something. It doesn't really matter. Lab was really terrible on this build. First 3 labs I did in my first try with like a lot of effort. Uber Lab really sucked because Raider has no physical damage mitigation, really no regen. The boss damage is okay once you start to get enough items going, but I tried to do it at like level 70 and it sucked. I did do it at level 80 eventually. But yeah, now that the build has started to move forward, I know I said I was having a lot of fun with it and then I bitched about it, but really now that the build is moving forward a little bit, we're getting into the low 80s. It's starting to feel really damn good. Seriously, I'm able to do low tier red maps at this point with the little amount of investment I put in. Really all I've purchased at this point is the Paradoxica, the Saviour, and an Awakened Cold Damage gem, which is admittedly a lot of currency, but that's just how melee builds are, let's be honest. And I can just one-shot these low-tier red maps, no problem at all. I still get one-shot myself from time to time because I'm a sub 5k life evasion character, but at this low level in the sort of early stages of gearing, there's not much you can do about it. One other sort of downside of the build that I've noticed is that you don't generate frenzies on your illusions sometimes, which can be kind of frustrating if you are taking a long time to pick out what you want to do with your metamorph. You drop your frenzies and then you go and you try to kill the metamorph. Sometimes your mirages won't exactly generate the frenzies you need them to, and it'll take them a while before they get up and running. Luckily, when the metamorph spawns its ads, you kill them, and then you'll very quickly start to spiral out of control, and you'll just delete the metamorph. Overall, I know I've kind of just bitched about the character a little bit, but I'm going to be honest, hopefully the footage behind me is speaking to how much fun this character is, because really at the end of the day, it's a very fast Flicker Strike character, which is, you love it or hate it, but for me, I think Flicker Strike is a very fun, albeit eye cancer skill to play, along with these illusions that sort of just clean up for you. So if you just fail to kill a single mob, or you miss a pack off to the side, or maybe you're doing a Legion encounter and you can't quite knock out that general, your mirages will clean up for you. They'll just fill in the blanks. They'll just go around. They'll make sure that each packs off to the side die. They'll help you with a little bit of single target damage. They really do a lot to make Flicker Strike, even though it is kind of unreliable, very unreliable, and cancerous to look at. The mirages make the skill so much more fun to play. I think I'm definitely, as I get into the low 90s, I'm going to go back and experiment a little bit more and try out some different skills, because there's so many cool strike skills I want to try. I really want to give Dual Strike another try, maybe just go all in with like an Awakened Melee Splash and an Awakened Ancestral Call. Even though the Threshold Jewel exists, the Melee Splash gem is so much better than the Threshold Jewel. Trust me, the AoE is just way bigger. Or maybe Smite. Smite is a really cool skill if I can just get a little bit more like strike juice on it. Really, there's just a lot of interesting strike skills that don't see a lot of play because they kind of suck. But the Saviour, as the name sort of implies, really saves these skills and makes them potentially viable, or maybe even good, dare I say it. So the next part of this video, I'm going to talk about how I plan to progress the build. And this is where I hope you guys give me a little bit of leeway here, because it's going to be a little bit upsetting how expensive I think I need to make this build to make it really strong. But really, that is the reality of Melee, in my opinion. If you want to play a Melee build and have it even start to compete with some of the fantastic Spellcaster, Minions, or Miner builds out there, you're just going to have to dump a lot of currency into it. There's just no two ways about it. Unless you want to play Impale and you're willing to sort of deal with the shitty clear that takes a while to ramp up on its own, really, Melee builds are just sort of expensive. Bow builds are expensive. Attack builds in general are just hella expensive. So here are the things that I'm going to need to do if I want to increase the overall power level of the build as I make it towards the end game. First of all, I'm going to need a hunter chest with attack crit, flat life, and percent life. I think I can get this on an elder chest as well, but I'm pretty sure the mod pool is smaller for hunter chests. I don't even know if I should be doing a hunter elder chest to sort of maximize my chances of hitting both of these. But really, once I get the base that I need, I'll probably just have to spam attack and life fossils. It's going to take a while. It's going to be a little bit expensive. But once I get that, I think an attack crit, life, and percent life chest is going to be an excellent balance of damage and survivability. You probably guessed it, but the next thing I'm probably going to need is a bottled faith flask. This flask has kind of become infamous since they sort of did their quasi reintroduction of Synthesis League, and that's just because it provides an absolute metric fuck ton of damage for like literally any and every build. Even minion builds use this just because it makes enemies take 10% increased damage that are on top of your consecrated ground. Really, the only downside of this flask is it's kind of awkward to use for clearing, since it really only affects enemies that are on top of your consecrated ground. But for bossing, this flask is absolutely nutty. It's 13 exalts for a reason, but if I can get this, I really think my damage is going to instantly sort of shoot up to a point where I can start doing tier 16 bosses or tier 14 plus at the very least to go back to farming Woke 8 at a level that I really want to do. Another thing that I can get is a Watcher's Eye, and this is actually really exciting for me because it's been a while since I've played a build that has a wealth of interesting Watcher's Eye options, but because I use Hatred and a level 1 Precision, there's so many fantastic options out there. For example, you can get Hatred with flat crit, penetration, flat cold damage, which is very good for this build. Conversion, which doesn't hurt at all. Precision has things like increased attack speed, increased crit multi, gain a flash charge on critical strike, which does have a cooldown but could help a little bit for bosses like Cyrus. Increased attack damage. I don't know if I said that already, but there's already so many fantastic options that I can get just by running level 1 Precision and a Hatred. It just, blows the box open in terms of options that I have available to me on my Watcher's Eye. The only downside of this is that a lot of the mods that would be beneficial for me, for example, if I could get penetration, flat cold, and crit multi, that would be an absolutely just insane jewel, partially because cast on crit cost breeze is so goddamn meta and popular right now. I basically share all the same desirable mods with a build like this, minus some of the attack damage oriented mods, but even those aren't fantastic for me. So it's kind of shitty. It means that basically if I find a jewel that's really good for me, instead of it just costing 10 exalts like it kind of should, more or less, it's probably going to cost closer to 100 exalts. And let's be real, guys, I'm not spending 100 exalts on a single item in this build. That's just, no, you guys know me. I've never done that before, and I probably won't anytime soon. Another thing that I could get is a nice little Assassin's Mark ring. This is something I tried my hand at crafting just a little bit the other day, and really I just did a nice little frigid pristine spam on it to try to get a nice little flat cold roll, maybe cold res, and then some life. I was pretty unlucky. I actually hit a decent sort of roll at the very start, but then I decided, I can do better, so I proceeded to dump another 20 more fossils into it and ended up with something significantly worse than I started with. But if I really want to spend some time and craft something nice, I might have to alt spam myself into a Assassin's Mark, hopefully augment Regal into some life or craft life on it, but getting a nice little Assassin's Mark ring to pair with my Mark of the Elder, which by the way, this is all going to be in a path of building below, so you guys can check out some of my ideas if you don't want to listen to me talk for 20 years. But getting a nice little Assassin's Mark ring will do so much to make the damage of this build shoot through the roof, especially if I can get that before I get the Bottled Faith. That makes the flat crit of Assassin's Mark that much better. And last but not least on the progression choices is I really need to get some Awakened Gems. And this is kind of like a feels bad man moment because the prices on these are pretty outrageous, but I've already bit the bullet with the Awakened added cold damage and the Awakened cold penetration because both of those are just huge damage steroids for this build. Like especially the added cold, because at the end of the day, when I'm using paradoxica, I have like no flat damage on my weapons, and I need as much added cold as possible. And that awakened added cold is just really just the added lightning and added cold. Those awakened gems are so goddamn overpowered. But speaking of overpowered, really the absolute best in slot awakened gem that I could get, sadly, you guys guessed it, is awakened multi-strike. Not only does this build give me a monumental amount of DPS, just cheat DPS, but it's also so good with flicker strike for two reasons. One, you attack so fast, you're very regularly going to be getting those 4 hits off, because that's what you need to do if you want to get maximum DPS out of multi-strike. You need to get all 3 for regular multi-strike or all 4 hits off for awakened multi-strike to really get that benefit. Otherwise, it only becomes a sort of like mid to like maybe high tier DPS support. The other reason why it's insane for this build is because, as you probably noticed, the attack speed is pretty damn high, which means my mana costs are pretty astronomical. It's like 57 mana or something, and then I have like 10 APS. I'm not like some crazy blitz berserker over here, but it's a lot of mana cost. So if I can get an awakened multi-strike that essentially allows me to attack one more time before I have to start spending mana again, which essentially gives my mana leech a chance to catch up, and it makes it so I can drop this absolutely annoying and painful to look at enduring mana flask that you guys have probably noticed in the bottom left-hand corner of my build this entire time. So that's going to kind of wrap things up for me today, guys. I don't want to ramble for too long because I've already sort of gone on and on about how much I'm enjoying this build, even though it does seem really expensive and kind of ridiculous to most of you guys. For me, I just, didn't want to keep saving for a headhunter because it wasn't really, I don't know, that didn't feel like super interesting content for me, and hopefully this is at least a little bit cool and a little bit different. If you're interested in hearing a guide for this character, feel free to let me know. It isn't really budget friendly or new player friendly, so I kind of hesitate to call it a casual Path of Exile guide and slap it on my channel. I feel like I could get a lot of flack for that, and I would just feel bad as a content creator. But, anyway, just let me know what you guys think. If you have any feedback or any ideas on how I can improve the build, feel free to let me know. I'm all ears. I haven't played Melee in a long time. I haven't played a Raider. I don't even know if I made a Raider before. It's been forever. And I definitely haven't played Flicker Strike in a minute. So I'm always open to suggestions. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name's Nathan, and have a nice day.
Thank you!
Really quick, I just wanted to thank my awesome Patreon supporters, Real Human, Zikarak, Squally, Zoljan, Coda, Julia, Alan, Kepler, Sparky Catafusk, Putzak, Kaiser 801, Kyle, Logan, Ice Dude, Ginzink, Anonymous, Orangina, and Marius. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for supporting me. You make my life very bearable from a monetary standpoint. Groceries and bills are cool. They really are, being an adult. Good stuff. Great stuff. If anyone else is interested in joining these fine folks over my Patreon, you can check me out at patreon.com/NathanBrotherBob. Or if you, want to check me out on Twitch or have a Twitch Prime sub laying around and want to support me that way, you can check me out at twitch.tv/NathanBrotherBob. Or if you, just don't want to support me, or you can't, or, for whatever reason, you just want to maybe hang out with me and my community, you can join my Discord. They're in the bottom right-hand corner. See, there's so many great ways you can, support this channel and be a part of the community, even if you have $0 and 0 cents to spend, because money isn't everything, or really anything at all, except for this part of the video is kind of money oriented. Okay, it's a little greedy sounding, but you know what? I gotta eat some food sometimes. Not a lot, but just sometimes. Yeah. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.